While the automotive world is completely consumed by electric hype, something unusual just happened. Not loudly, not with daily leaks or flashy reveals, but quietly enough that many people almost missed it. As brands compete over screen size, acceleration numbers, and software tricks, Mazda stepped in and asked a very different question. What if all this technology is actually pulling drivers away from the experience instead of improving it? That question led to the Mazda EZ60, also known as the CX-6E. And at first glance, it looks like just another electric SUV. But that assumption is exactly where most people get it wrong, because this car wasn't designed to win spec sheets. It was designed to challenge the direction the entire EV industry is moving in. And once you understand what Mazda did differently, especially with the battery, you begin to see why experts believe this vehicle could quietly change how electric cars are built in the years ahead. But to understand why the EZ60 exists at all, you have to understand Mazda first. Because cars like this don't appear out of nowhere. Mazda's story doesn't start with cars. It started over a century ago, in Hiroshima, Japan, in 1920. Back then, Mazda wasn't building engines, dashboards, or vehicles of any kind. The company was originally called Toyo Cork Kogyo, and yes, it worked with cork. Over time, that focus shifted toward machinery and industrial tools, and without realizing it, Mazda was quietly building the engineering mindset that would later define its identity. By the 1930s, Mazda introduced its first three-wheeled truck. It was simple, functional, and practical, exactly what Japan needed at the time. But the moment Mazda truly separated itself from other automakers came decades later, when it made a decision most companies would never risk: the rotary engine. While nearly every manufacturer stuck with conventional engine layouts, Mazda chose a completely different path. The rotary was lighter, smoother, and mechanically unconventional, but it was also risky. That decision alone tells you everything about Mazda's mindset. They weren't interested in copying what worked for everyone else. They were interested in building something that felt different to drive. As Mazda expanded into global markets in the 1970s and 80s, that philosophy followed. In the US and Europe, Mazda earned a reputation for cars that weren't always the fastest or the most luxurious, but were engaging, balanced, and enjoyable. Mazda never tried to be the biggest brand in the room. Instead, it focused on being consistent. Even today, while Mazda sells roughly 1.2 to 1.5 million vehicles globally each year, far less than giants like Toyota or Volkswagen, it maintains something many larger brands struggle with: identity. And that identity explains why Mazda didn't rush into electric vehicles when everyone else did. When EVs first exploded into the mainstream, automakers rushed in. Some launched entire electric lineups almost overnight. Others rebranded existing vehicles and called it innovation. Mazda didn't. For years, critics labeled the company as slow, hesitant, or even left behind. But internally, Mazda was paying attention. Instead of jumping straight into full EVs, Mazda focused on hybrids and plug-in hybrids first. They studied how batteries aged. They watched how customers actually used electric cars in real life. And what they noticed wasn't always flattering. Drivers loved the instant torque. They appreciated the quiet cabins. But something kept coming up again and again. The joy of driving was disappearing. Mazda realized that if they released an EV that felt numb, heavy, or disconnected, it wouldn't just hurt one model. It would damage the brand's trust permanently. So they waited. And when Mazda finally decided to go fully electric, they didn't design a car for everyone. They designed it for drivers who still wanted to drive. Which brings us to the EZ60. Mazda was very clear about one thing from the start. The EZ60 is not an electric gadget. It's not built for drivers who want the car to do everything while they sit back and swipe through menus. It's not trying to be a rolling smartphone. Mazda listened to a growing group of EV owners who were quietly saying the same thing. Electric cars feel powerful, but lifeless. Steering often feels artificial. Brakes feel disconnected. The car reacts instantly, but not naturally. Many drivers say it feels like the machine is in control, not them. The EZ60 exists as a response to that frustration. Mazda believes there is still a large group of people who want efficiency and engagement. People who commute during the week, drive highways on weekends, and still care about balance, steering feedback, and confidence in corners. Instead of removing the driver from the equation, Mazda put them back at the center. And that philosophy becomes obvious the moment you look at the car. Modern EVs often try very hard to look electric. Sharp angles, aggressive lighting, designs that scream future at every turn. Mazda deliberately avoided that. The EZ60 doesn't look strange. It doesn't rely on gimmicks, and that's exactly the point. Its proportions are clean. The lines are natural. The shape feels balanced rather than forced. This is a car designed to look good today, and still look right a decade from now. Inside, the same restraint continues. There are screens, but they don't dominate the cabin. Controls are placed where your hands expect them to be. Physical buttons still exist for essential functions. Mazda believes drivers shouldn't need a tutorial just to adjust basic settings. The cabin feels familiar within minutes, not weeks. This isn't nostalgia, it's ergonomics. But the most important difference isn't visible at all. It's under the floor. Ask most EV companies about a new model, and the first thing they'll tell you is range. 600 kilometers, 700 kilometers, even more on paper. Mazda didn't play that game. Instead of chasing the largest battery possible, Mazda asked a more uncomfortable question. What does a bigger battery actually do to the car? More battery means more weight. More weight affects handling, braking, suspension, and tire wear. It changes how the car feels in every situation. So Mazda chose balance over bragging rights. The EZ60 uses a battery size to match real-world needs, not marketing numbers. It's positioned low and evenly within the chassis to maintain stability and predictable handling. Thermal management was also a major focus. Many EV issues don't appear on day one. They show up after years of heat, cold, and repeated fast charging. Mazda engineered the battery system to perform consistently across climates and driving styles, even if that meant slower charging speeds compared to rivals. The goal wasn't to impress on launch day. It was still performing years later. Mazda understands something many EV buyers learn the hard way. The number on the spec sheet isn't the number you live with. Traffic, weather, air conditioning, driving habits, all of these reduce the range in daily use. Instead of inflating expectations, Mazda aimed for honesty. The EZ60 is designed so its stated range closely matches what drivers experience in normal conditions. Acceleration is predictable. Power delivery is smooth rather than aggressive. The car behaves consistently whether you drive calmly or assertively. This reduces one of the biggest fears surrounding EV ownership: uncertainty. Mazda believes confidence matters more than extremes, and that philosophy may have consequences far beyond this one vehicle. In the US, many early EV adopters are now on their second or third electric car. They've experienced the technology, and some of them are realizing what they miss: driving engagement. Mazda's approach offers an alternative, an EV that doesn't feel like a compromise. In Europe, where balance and driving dynamics are deeply valued, the EZ60's restrained design and focus on feel align naturally with market preferences. And in China, where EV innovation moves at lightning speed, Mazda raises an uncomfortable question: is faster always better? As the industry burns through designs and platforms at a record pace, Mazda's slower, more deliberate strategy stands out. Not loudly, but noticeably. Many EV interiors today feel like tablets with steering wheels. Every function is buried in menus. Every adjustment requires attention away from the road. Mazda intentionally resisted that. The EZ60 uses technology that helps, but doesn't force it where it distracts. Physical controls remain for core functions because they're faster, safer, and less fatiguing. Mazda believes drivers shouldn't have to remember where things are. They should feel where they are. This reduces mental load. It reduces stress, and over time, it makes driving more enjoyable. Technology stays in the background. The driver stays in control. The Mazda EZ60 doesn't promise to reinvent the electric market. It doesn't claim to replace everything that came before it. Instead, it asks a question the industry has avoided. What if electric cars don't need to overwhelm drivers to be advanced? What if enjoyment still matters? If vehicles like the EZ60 succeed, it won't cause an overnight shift, but it could slowly change priorities. Less noise, more balance, less spectacle, more substance. And sometimes, the most meaningful changes don't arrive with fanfare. They arrive quietly and make everyone else stop and think. If you enjoy real car stories that go beyond hype and focus on what actually matters behind the wheel, don't forget to subscribe. We'll keep bringing you the stories most people overlook.